Of. Not today. As Jinhyo just rolled his eyes. Come on. It's so easy to tease him. So-hyun stepped in front of Jinhyo, crossing her arms. Why do you let him push you around like that? Jinhyo scratched his head, confused. What are you talking about? So-hyun raised an eyebrow. You're an awakened being. Can't you handle him? Jinhyo sighed. Do you think I should just stand up to him? Or something? So-hyun bit her lip, unsure of what to say next. What would Jinho's dad do if Jinho punched his supposedly successful brother? Just thinking about it was super scary. She totally got why Jinho always let his brother push him around. She shot a look at Jinsung. Either way, he's still the same pain. She disliked Jinsung just as much as Jinho did. So-hyun was one of the few who knew what Jinsung was really like beneath his nice guy act. But Jinho didn't see things her way, and it wasn't just because Jinsung was his big brother. No way he wanted to take him down in a fair fight, not talk trash behind his back. Jinho stayed quiet for a moment before So-hyun broke the silence. So, are you still going through with that plan? She asked carefully. Jinho replied, acting confused. You know, the one where you try to become guildmaster just to show him up. So-hyun said, her tone light but curious. Instead of answering, Jinho just gave her a sly smile. Who would even take him seriously? People would probably just laugh in his face. But here's the thing. Jinho was about to challenge Jinsung, and guess what? His odds of winning had gone way up, because he had a secret weapon, Jin-Woo. If he could just get his hands on a guildmaster's license, it was totally possible. Yeah, he could totally pull this off. So-hyun noticed the fire in his eyes, crossed her arms, and declared, I'd rather die than work for that guy. So-hyun said you'd better do this if you don't want to fight with your dad. His response. A simple thanks. So-hyun wasn't just anyone. She used to be a famous child actor, and now was an A-rank hunter. Plus her wealthy background made her a top choice among hunters in Korea. So-hyun had said no to every job offer that came her way. She preferred modeling here and there instead. But recently she got an offer she couldn't pass up. A chance to be one of the first members of the Yojin Guild. This wasn't just any ordinary offer. It was a direct request from Chairman Myung-Han-yu himself, who also happened to be her uncle. So-hyun didn't want to work for Jinsung, but turning down her uncle wasn't an option. She had a lot on her mind, trying to figure out what this decision would mean. Even though So-hyun didn't fully trust Jinhyo, she had no way around it. She had to count on him. As So-hyun's eyes locked onto the phone, buzzing in Jinho's pocket. Aren't you gonna answer that? She asked. Jinhyo, lost in thought, snapped back to reality. Oh, he finally dug his phone out. When he saw the number on the screen, his face lit up like a light bulb. Hey boss. It's me. He answered cheerfully, sounding way more excited than So-hyun expected. Got it, boss. On my way. Jinhyo hung up the phone. So-hyun raised an eyebrow. What just happened? Who was that? What's going on? She asked. But Jinhyo didn't have time to explain. It's an emergency, he said quickly, grabbing his stuff. I'll tell you later. I promise. He rushed out the door before she could ask another question. So-hyun was left standing there, wondering what had just happened, and why Jinhyo was in such a hurry. All of a sudden. What's got him so pumped? Jinhyo usually looked like a total downer at family gatherings, but now he seemed different. Never thought I'd see the day. She definitely needed to get the scoop from him later. Meanwhile, Jinhyo went on the hunt for his dad. Dinner was about to start, and he knew he couldn't skip it without his father's okay, especially with all the relatives around. Spotting his dad across the room, Jinhyo headed over. His dad looked like a tiger about to pounce. His face fierce, and his personality super strict. Jinhyo had a hard time talking to his dad. Even though he hadn't said anything yet, he was already super nervous. But he knew he had to be brave, because he promised himself he would. Taking 2 deep breaths, he started walking toward his father. A few times he almost turned around and ran the other way, but he pushed through the fear and kept going. Finally, Jinhyo stood in front of the chairman. Father, the way they acted around each other, you'd never guess they were even related. Myung-han turned his attention to Jinhyo. What is it? The heavy tension made everyone nearby quickly disappear. May I be excused for a bit? Jinhyo's voice was unusually soft when he spoke to his father. I'll be back before dinner, Jinhyo said, trying to sound confident. Myung-han looked like he was about to explode, but instead he let out a heavy sigh. Fine. Go on then. Gino's face lit up. He bowed quickly. Thank you, father. Then he darted off like a bullet. Myung-han watched his son leave, his expression as hard as stone. His wife walked up to him. Honey, I just got a call from Vienna, she said. He had been waiting for this moment, and now it was finally here. Myung-han's face lit up with curiosity. What happened in the competition? He asked. She won, he said with a smile. No surprise there, she's your daughter, after all. His smile was quick, so quick that anyone watching might have thought they imagined it. When is she coming back to Korea? He asked. Myung-han's face fell. I told her plainly to be here for her grandfather's memorial service. Oh, sweetie, kids these days just don't see memorials as a big deal, she replied softly. He sighed and shook his head. His wife stepped over, adjusted his tie, and said gently, and maybe you should show Gino a little more kindness. Not this again, he muttered. A tiger should look after its own cub, not some stray kitten. He frowned, but she continued. Both the cub and the kitten are yours. Wait, they're your kids too, the other person said with a grin. Myung-han scratched his head, confused. The other person leaned in and whispered, you know, that was the first time I've seen Jin-Ho crack a smile around you since he left middle school. Simi. Myung-han's eyes widened in surprise. Is that true? He quickly glanced in the direction Jin-Ho had gone. But his attention didn't stay there for long. He shrugged casually and said, with a smirk, maybe he's just got a crush on someone now. Anyway, everyone's waiting for us. We should probably head inside. It's at the Hunters Association headquarters in Guroga, Seoul. An employee was checking some devices when they stopped in front of a small manometer. Huh? What's going on with this thing? The needle, which should have been steady at 0, kept jumping all over the place. It looked like the device was acting up. But that wasn't totally weird. Stuff like that happens sometimes. It was delicate equipment known to break often. Kim. Yes, sir. The subordinate he'd summoned came up to him. How many gates were checked with this manometer? Which serial number, sir? Kim asked. Checking the records. N1744. E. He nodded as he looked through the files. It was used for 7 gates 2 days ago. 2 days ago. Let me see. He confirmed that 2 days ago, 7 gates had been measured with this particular manometer. Out of those 7, 4 were now closed. Were there any problems with the gates? His superior asked. No, I haven't heard anything, Kim replied. The employee scratched his stubbled chin thoughtfully. Whenever there was an error with a manometer, raid permits for the gates it had been used on were cancelled immediately. What if hunters walk through a gate, thinking it was a C rank when it was actually an A or B? They might not make it back safely. High-rank dungeons are super dangerous. It's kind of like how much stronger a high-rank hunter is compared to a low-rank one. That's why big guilds handle all the high-rank dungeons. Should I report this now? Reporting a problem is easy. If he decided to do that, the strike squads would get upset, because they'd lose their permits. Plus, if re-evaluating the dungeons took too long and led to a dungeon break, he'd be in trouble. Either way, he could end up losing his job. After all, getting a job at the Hunters Association is a big deal. It's like working for a public service organization. To work there, you needed to pass a civil service test. Just thinking about losing his job made him feel powerless. That can't happen, he told himself. He shook his head, trying to clear his mind. His subordinate could tell something was bothering him, and asked carefully. Then, what should we do? He sighed. 2 days had already passed. If there was a problem, wouldn't something have happened by now? It should be fine. Is that okay? You think anything would happen? It's already been a couple of days. I guess so. The underling nodded in agreement. Just report that N7044B was fine until yesterday and note that it started malfunctioning today. Understood. Songman, the department manager of the second administration team of the White Tiger Guild, straightened up from chopping green onions. His back cracked with a loud "Karks." Off. Today's menu was soybean paste stew. Sangman had become a total boss in the kitchen over the years. For 8 years he'd lived on his own, learning how to make all kinds of dishes. But things really changed 5 years ago, when he realized he looked awful from eating too much instant food. That's when he decided to start cooking for real, and now he could even make a dish just by seeing it briefly on TV. But here's the cool part. As he got better at cooking, he started leaning towards simpler recipes. These days he mostly whipped up easy dishes like soybean paste stew. Sangmin took a bite of his latest creation and nodded in satisfaction. That's the stuff, he said, clearly impressed by his own skills. Too bad he had no one to share it with. It really was a tragedy. Should I invite someone over for dinner sometime? The face of one of his subordinates popped into his head, but he quickly pushed the thought away. As tired as Sangmin was of being called an old bachelor, he didn't want people getting the wrong idea if he invited a male subordinate over for dinner. Speaking of which, how was Kachul doing with that task? Kachul was smart and listened well, but he could also be pretty clumsy at times. Man, I need to stop thinking about work when I'm home. It was time to eat. Sangmin hummed a tune as he set the soybean paste stew on the living room table. Eating alone while watching TV was his usual routine. The big dining table felt too empty for just one person. He flopped onto the couch, remote in hand. Bill, the news popped on. Breaking news has just come in. At least being single had one perk. He didn't have to argue with anyone about what to watch. The TV was stuck on one channel, and the room was quiet except for its chatter. Sangmin shoveled a bite of rice into his mouth, while staring at the screen mounted on the wall. The news anchor's voice caught his attention. A shocking explosion rocked the Hunter Command Center in Washington, D.C., stunning the whole country. Reports are flying that S-rank hunters were battling each other. Sangmin let out a laugh of disbelief. That's crazy, he muttered, shaking his head as he went back to eating. That's crazy, he muttered, shaking his head at the bad news on TV while he picked which side dish to try first. Not many options were left, but one thing was clear: kimchi had to go first. CCTV footage near the command center shows a sudden crack appearing on the building's wall. He wasn't paying much attention to what the news anchor was saying. Sangmin was super focused on putting a mouth-watering piece of kimchi from the fridge onto his steaming hot rice. Just as he was about to take a big bite, his phone suddenly rang loudly. Seriously? Who could this be? Sangmin muttered, grabbing his phone, but when he saw who was calling, he quickly answered. Hello, this is Sangmin. On the other end was Jin-Woo. Sangmin was happy to take the call, but his face slowly went from smiling to confused as he tried to wrap his head around what Jin-Woo was asking. Wait, really? You want to watch the new recruits train? Jin-Woo hung up the phone with a click. At first, Sangmin had been puzzled by the request, but after hearing Jin-Woo's explanation, he agreed to help out without any hesitation. Jin-Woo was ready to watch the White Tiger Guild's newest trainees take on a dungeon raid. He'd borrowed a car, thanks to Jinyo, who had taken time out of his busy day to bring over the van. Jinyo had apologized for having to leave right away, heading back to wherever he'd come from. As Jin-Woo watched him go, he thought Jinyo was a really stand-up guy. With that, everything was set. Jin-Woo stood outside the apartment building of the student he was there to see. It was just a short walk from their place. Only 2 minutes. Just a short walk away. He looked around the block. The neighborhood was small, with old houses packed tightly together. It was clear her family didn't have much money either. He totally got why the girl was so excited about being a hunter. He'd been in her shoes before, but he also knew people like her were often the first ones to get hurt. He'd been injured plenty of times himself, and he understood how dangerous this world could be. There were even some super close calls where he almost died. If his mom hadn't gotten sick, he wouldn't have taken this job in the first place. Dungeons were no joke, especially if you were just starting out as a low-ranked hunter. If he let her keep going, she might either quit, because it was too hard, or, well, something way worse could happen. Sadly, this kind of thing happened all the time. Every day, lots of hunters got seriously injured, or didn't make it back. Jin-Woo knew he couldn't help everyone, and to be honest, most people weren't worth the effort. They'd each made their own choices, but then something changed. As soon as Jin-Woo found out who she was, everything shifted. The name was familiar to him. Just then, Jin-Woo felt someone watching him. He glanced up to see that little troublemaker heading his way, her sneakers making soft scuffling sounds on the ground. She had this confident stride, like she owned the place, and a mischievous spark in her eyes that made him roll his in exasperation. The girl had her hair pulled back into a bun, and there was a sharp glint of attitude in her eyes. It was definitely her. Ugh. The high schooler stared at him, confused. What are you doing here, mister? They locked eyes, surprised to see each other. Talk about a small world. He scratched his head, thinking back. This was the girl who wanted to become a hunter. What were the chances they'd cross paths again? Song Gi-han was one of a kind on Jinho's team. She was both the only girl and the youngest member. Jin-Woo had been nervous about working with someone so young, worried it might cause problems. "Is it okay to have a minor in our group?" he asked. The teacher explained that they had talked to a counselor, and everything was fine by the rules. "Most people avoid hiring minors," she added, "because if something goes wrong, it could get complicated." When Jin-Woo heard Song-gi's name from his teacher, a wave of emotion swept over him. It was surprising, but also kind of exciting. Jin-Woo had definitely looked into why Junior was skipping school. It started happening around the same time. Her strike squad began doing raids. At this point he couldn't just pretend it wasn't his problem. After all, he'd given her a lot of money, even though she was still a student, which might have made her feel like she could handle things. She shouldn't. If something happened to her in a dungeon, Jin-Woo knew he'd be haunted by guilt for not stepping in sooner. Jin-Woo figured talking to Song-gi now would save him any worries later, so he decided to spend some time with her today. He didn't think it'd be too tough. Song-gi looked surprised when she saw Jin-Woo. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her eyes wide with astonishment. "Are you the hunter my teacher wanted me to meet?" she continued. Jin-Woo felt a bit awkward being called Mr., but he smiled anyway. "I don't know what my teacher told you," Song-gi said, "but I'm not interested in school anymore." Song-gi stood her ground. "I'm not quitting hunting," she said firmly. Normally quiet around her team, Song-gi had strong opinions of her own. Just like any teen her age, Jin-Woo's reaction caught her off guard. He didn't seem angry at all. Instead, he looked thoughtful, even a bit amused. Jin-Woo grinned. "I get it," he said. "I've got a kid at home with their own mind too." Song-gi hesitated, unsure how to react. Jin-Woo continued, his voice soft but clear. "I'm not here to tell you to stop." His words left her speechless. "What?" Song-gi. I wasn't the type to back down when someone told her to stop. Jin-Woo hadn't planned on talking sense into her. What he really needed was to show her how things actually were. Because he'd been just like her once. He'd figured this out during his first raid. The truth about hunting was way harsher than anyone imagined. Song-gi tried her best not to look puzzled. Jin-Woo stepped closer, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Song-gi flinched and almost took a step back. But she stopped herself, not wanting to show she was nervous. Jin-Woo gave her a mischievous grin, without even realizing it. "I'm here to help you become an amazing hunter," he said confidently. Song-gi I didn't need much convincing when Jin-Woo mentioned they could watch the new members of the White Tiger Guild train. The chance to see them in action was too good to pass up, and she quickly agreed to go with him. She didn't suspect anything unusual was going on. As they walked, Song-gi asked, "So, how do you know my teacher?" Jin-Woo pulled out a photo of himself and Gina. Her eyes widened as she looked at the picture. "Wait, so you're really Gina's brother?" she asked, sounding a bit surprised. Jin-Woo hesitated for a moment, not totally comfortable with the title, but he didn't let it distract him. Everything was going smoothly so far. "Ready to go?" he asked, gesturing towards their destination. Song-gi nodded eagerly. "Thanks." With that, Jin-Woo led Song-gi to where the White Tiger Guild rookies were set to start their nighttime training. The adventure was just beginning. He was told they'd start at 9, so there was plenty of time to get there. Room. A big black van, way too large for just 2 people, zoomed around a bend. Jin-Woo wondered if his quick reflexes and sharp awareness were making the driving easier. Even though he hadn't driven in years, handling the van felt surprisingly simple. Whenever he focused, the other cars seemed as slow as snails. These numbers were super handy in different situations. Sitting in the passenger seat, Song-gi asked, "Does Gina really study all the time at home?" "Too. I heard she even put pages from an English dictionary up on her bedroom walls, so she can study while falling asleep." Was there really a rumor like that about her? To Jin-Woo, she was just a sleepyhead who loved fried chicken. "Gina is just like you. When she comes home, she plays games, eats, and sleeps. Most of the time though, she's sleeping." "No way. Then, how are her grades so good?" "I have no idea either. Back in middle school, she used to go to the arcade with me all the time. They kept talking until they reached the gate." Jin-Woo pulled into a parking spot with a loud screech. This neighborhood was known for having a bunch of magical gates, so it wasn't hard to find a spot. Most people had already left. Jin-Woo had heard rumors that about 80% of the houses were empty. Some even said the whole area might get torn down once everyone else was gone. Timim pim. Jin-Woo and Song-gi hopped out of the van, their shoes hitting the pavement. The streets were super quiet, almost creepy, with so few people around. Something felt off in the air. Jin-Woo could have sworn he heard voices whispering from beneath his feet. A low, eerie sound. Was he just imagining things? Song-gi clutched his arm tightly, her eyes wide with fear, as she scanned the spooky surroundings. But then she spotted something in the distance. Other hunters. Her face lit up like she'd just seen her favorite pop stars. These weren't just any hunters. They were from the White Tiger Guild. To someone like Song-gi, who idolized these adventurers, they were basically rock stars. If you think about how hunters are shown on TV, this makes total sense. Oh, you really did come. Kachul said as he walked right up to Jin-Woo. Do you remember me? Jin-Woo nodded slightly. Kachul's smile felt real and not just something he'd used to make a sale. So Jin-Woo smiled back. Even though they hadn't hung out much, Kachul seemed like a good guy. Manager and told me everything. Kachul said. Is this the student? Someone asked. Song-gi bowed and said, hello. Just as they were saying, hello, a tall, muscular man with a serious face stepped in. Enough chit-chat. Let's move out. He barked. We're not here to hang around, it's already 9. He turned and walked away without waiting for an answer. He looked like the kind of guy who meant business. Jin-Woo glanced at Kachul, wondering what would happen next. Who's that guy? Jin-Woo asked curiously. Kachul shrugged. Oh, he's a new A-rank member. But he wasn't too thrilled about someone watching the training. He said something like, a dungeon isn't a playground. He's an A-rank. Jin-Woo's eyes widened in surprise. Kachul nodded. Of course an A-rank hunter would act all high and mighty like that. Jin-Woo had another question. What's the strike squad looking like today? Kachul replied. There's 1 A rank, 7 B ranks and 4 C ranks, so 12 members total. But wait, A and B rank, hunters going into a C rank dungeon. Jin-Woo's voice trailed off in confusion. Kachul chuckled. Yeah. Well, even if you're high rank, a newbie is still a newbie. This is to help them get some dungeon experience, Kachul said with a grin. He added that they'd be thrown into high-level dungeons right after this training because they're super strong. Sure, but an A rank and 7 B ranks seem like overkill, Jin-Woo replied, raising an eyebrow. Jin-Woo's expression shifted. There was only one reason Sangmin had agreed to this. He flaunted the White Tiger Guild's awesome new recruits to change Jin-Woo's mind. But contrary to what Sangmin and Kachul expected, Jin-Woo sighed at the C-rank gate. The team was way too strong for such an easy mission. His main worry, if things went too smoothly, his plan would fail. He kept telling himself everything would be okay. She'd realize on her own. He knew she needed to see how little help an E-rank hunter would be in a place like this. When are we going in? Song-gi kept bugging him to go inside, clueless about Jin-Woo's secret plan. Glancing at her out of the corner of his eye, he saw her face was glowing with excitement. He thought, curious how long her excitement would last. Jin-Woo held back a grin as he spoke to Kachul.